You got the camera set up. I'll help you out. Yes, my name's Eric Metaxas, and this is a biography of someone named Dietrich Bonhoeffer. He's most famous for being a German pastor and theologian who got involved in the plot to kill Adolf Hitler. That's the sort of the one line. He was imprisoned by the Nazis and eventually executed by the Nazis just weeks before the end of the war. It's an amazing story of how a man of God gets involved in a plot to assassinate the head of state. He was also a genuinely brilliant theologian. I mean, he would be famous just for his theology. He wrote some books some folks would have heard called The Cost of Discipleship, Life Together. Just for writing those, he would be world famous. I mean, they've been bestsellers for 6 decades now. But he felt that God led him to get involved in the plot against Hitler because he felt, as a Christian, led to stand up for the Jews of Europe. Anyway, the story obviously is sort of unpacked in the book because it's an amazing story of how he gets there theologically, how he justifies it. But he's a real hero, and I think, let me say that when I was writing the book, I wasn't thinking of the parallels to today. Mm-hmm. But in retrospect, while I was finishing the book, these parallels kept popping out to me, that there are elements in his story which I think speak to us today, and I think it's one of the reasons the book has been, you know, a bestseller, New York Times bestseller, whatever. It struck a chord with people who see something in the story of Bonhoeffer which helps them navigate, you know, how do I, as a Christian, deal with evil in the world today? How do I, as a Christian, deal with the encroachment of the state on me as a Christian, on my Christian values? I mean, that's just those are the rudiments of it, but it has definitely struck a nerve or a chord with people.
Now, the book is over 500 pages, so that's a lot of a lot of dedication. So they tell me, yeah.
Page, did you?
Oh, read it forwards, backwards, inside out. I have it memorized.
I think.
What is kind of the when did you first come across the story, and kind of what is your motivation to put so much time and so much effort into this?
Basically, in 1988, I graduated Yale in '84, and I was kind of confused about faith and whatever. I was politically liberal and sort of secular, just like looking for the meaning of life, wanted to be a writer. And I had this dramatic, I would say, conversion experience. In fact, I'll tell people to go to my website because there's a video it's an amazing little story about a dream that I had. God revealed himself to me in a dream, which sounds insane, but watch the video and you'll see. My website is ericmetaxas.com. Right around that time, as somebody was sharing with me about the Bible, and I was just suddenly beginning to question faith and God and all the meaning of life, the same guy who was sharing with me about the Bible hands me a copy of Bonhoeffer's book, The Cost of Discipleship, which, as I said, it's an incredibly famous book. It's been translated into like a million languages. And I remember reading the book and thinking, what an amazing, I've never heard Christianity like this. I mean, he's brilliantly, brilliant, and there's an authenticity to him. It's not like just typical religion or whatever. There's something about him. I was really moved by his writing. And my friend said to me, have you ever heard of Bonhoeffer before? And I said, no, I've never heard of Bonhoeffer before. They don't teach you about Bonhoeffer at Yale University. And he tells me, well, Bonhoeffer's this pastor who gets involved in the plot to kill Hitler. Because of his faith in Christ, he stands up for the Jews and goes to his death in a concentration camp. And I remember, it's 22 years ago, but I remember it like it was yesterday. I was so moved by the story. I said, how come I've never heard this story before? Yeah. This is a story of heroism, of a man who was a true patriot, who stood up against the tyrant of his time. It's an amazing story. And I was so moved, I thought, surely someday I've got to do something with this. In fact, one of the reasons I was moved is because my mom is German from Germany. So I'm German. So this is part of my story. My whole life I've been hearing about this period. My grandfather was killed in the war. He was a genuinely reluctant German soldier who listened to the BBC with his ear literally pressed against the radio speaker because in those days you were not allowed to listen to anything. So this really haunted me because I said, this Bonhoeffer is a man who is speaking for people like my grandfather, for Germans like my grandfather, but also for the Jews of Europe. More importantly for the Jews of Europe. And it just completely captivated me. And I thought, surely someday I've got to do something with this. I never dreamt I'd write a biography. I didn't have an ambition to write biographies. I've been a writer for VeggieTales. I've written a lot of books of popular Christian apologetics called Everything You Want to Know About God, but Were Afraid to Ask. But finally, a few years ago, somebody asked me to write a biography of William Wilberforce, which some folks know the film Amazing Grace. My book is titled Amazing Grace. And at that time, people kept saying, you've written this biography of Wilberforce, this Christian hero who abolished slavery. Who's your next victim? Who are you going to write about next? And I thought, I don't really want to write another biography, but if I had to pick, there's only one person who captivates me the way Wilberforce did, and that's Bonhoeffer. And so, strangely enough, I said I would do it, and here we are. I never thought it would be this long. You can show, I mean, you can see that it's a thick book.
You get a weight workout, an arm workout with it, but.
I mean, it's the first really definitive biography on him in over 40 years. So I felt like I've got to tell the whole story. And there's a lot of new material. I mean, the first biography was written over 40 years ago by his best friend, and I thought there's new material out, and in a way, as an American, I'm able to put it in context for American audiences and sort of to tell the fuller story of what was going on in Germany, what was happening. There's a lot that we wouldn't know as Americans, and I thought I want to tell the story because otherwise you can't really understand what he was fighting against.
I was just interested to know that. How did you work with the language translation? I mean, do you speak German or do you speak?
I speak some German, as I said, because my mom is German, but I don't speak enough. I don't speak it well enough so that I was able to study him in the original. So my German helped me. But this is the beauty of it, is that now in 2011, almost everything he wrote, there's 16 volumes of his sermons, his letters, his everything, and almost all of that has now been translated into English. 10 years ago, I would have not been able to write this book because a lot of these things were not yet translated into English. So in a way, it was a treasure trove for me, and I would discover these letters and these journals and things, and I said, I know most people who love Bonhoeffer have never read this letter or this piece, this paragraph from his journal. Amazing, amazing stuff. So I was able to find the best, examples of his writing, of his life, or whatever, and sort of put it all between the two covers of one book. So there's a lot of Bonhoeffer in this book. It's not me. Hopefully, it's history and it's Bonhoeffer, and I just sort of make it possible by giving it context.
All right, my final question for you is, we see things that I think probably people from my generation, we see movies like Inglourious Basterds, and that's like our take on what's going on in that if people don't remember what happened in their history classes. Do you think things like that are good because they make people interested in that time period and in learning more about it, or do you think that they trivialize it?
I think Quentin Tarantino not only did a disservice to good Germans, but to the Jews who experienced the Holocaust. I don't think he meant to do that, but I think his movie is a grave disservice, and I was really upset by the content of it. It glamorizes evil. I mean, it puts people on the same moral level as the Nazis. I mean, it's just bad guys versus bad guys.
When there's a real story
it's really, I mean, I think that part of the fun for me of writing this story is I'm able to tell the story of how this happened in Germany, because I know most people who have grown up in latter generations don't really know the story. How did this really happen? What was really going on? How is it possible that a civilized, incredible culture was able to stoop to these depths of evil? How is it possible? Could it happen again? And I mean, I think the answer is yes, it could happen again, which is one reason that I think it's really important for us to know what happened then. And as I said, there are a lot of weird parallels that I noticed as I was writing the book, and people keep saying that to me. I mean, every day I'm getting emails from people saying that, when you're writing this book, did you know that, that there would be these parallels? The answer is I had no clue. I just wrote what happened. And I think, let me just say that I think God called me to write this story because it applies to us today, not because I had a great idea. I mean, I just thought I'm going to write a biography of Bonhoeffer. So it ended up being a lot more than that. And the fact that so many people keep talking about the parallels today, that was just simply not something that I was aware of when I was writing it. But I'm obviously, in retrospect, really glad because it makes it, even more relevant than I thought it would be.
Well, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it, and thank you for the work that you did. That's a lot of time and a lot of effort to make history relevant too.
Yes, it was. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. All right, let's see if we can.